when I hear the phrase listen and be heard, it takes me to thinking about some of those principles of the community organizing, right? And that it should be an exchange, right? It makes me think of the whole conversation around stuff like mutual aid, right? Like it should be
Mm.
something that we're here to know each other, and to do that, one has to listen, but one also has to be heard, right? So you have to, one, build that confidence in yourself to be able to say the things that you're feeling or thinking, right? And hope that the folks around you are open to that, right? Or at least open to the conversation around that. And then you have to do the same, right? And to me, it's that foundation of what it means to connect with people.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. And now it's interesting. The Black Lantern bookstore is not your usual bookstore where you're getting, inventory from the latest books being sold and trying to turn that around. But I want to know, in your inventory and in your experience, if any of those books have actually been banned, and just what your experience has been where you are with the whole
Mm.
phenomenon of banning books, which is something I've been asking now for a few seasons, but somehow this conversation has expanded a little into just freedom of speech,
Mm.
but so feel free to address that however you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Freedom of speech too, right? And freedom of memory too, right? I think something that I didn't think of in the same way, that I've been thinking about very differently in being a part of the bookstore project, is the idea of archive, right? And
Mhm.
especially informal archive, and how important that is for people and for culture, for community, and for society, right? To make sure that someone's taking care of your stories and your experiences, right? I'll give a little context too around the project or the projects. So we have a physical space in Englewood, California. And in that space, kind of two things are happening. One is the Black Lantern bookstore, right? So it's a bookstore cooperative, all Black owned. It's myself, Cipriano, Natalie, and Zach. So we're the three who co-founded the space alongside, and we had a lot of help from an organization called Community Movement Builders, which is originally out of Atlanta, but they really helped us kind of get started in the space. And so it's a Black radical bookstore. We were trying to create something that's in the tradition of Martin Sostre and all of those, kind of like the whole Black Books time, right? A place for
Mhm.
community to come, learn, talk, discuss, right? Explore new ideas. So that's in the physical space. That's in the front. So you walk in, and then you're in Black Lantern Books, and that takes up about a third of the space. And then in the last two halves of the space is a community lending library that we're building out. So that's Legacy Library. So that's kind of what's happening in that space, right?
So the
Um,
origin of that, though, let's talk a little bit
mm,
about that. I guess we've gone into this interview, which is fine. It's based on the collection originally. Why don't you tell our listeners about that?
yeah. So it's and we called it Legacy Library because we've been kind of charged with the legacy of a movement elder that passed. So his name is Kwazi Nkrumah. He was a lifelong organizer, born in Baltimore, organized all across the country in labor, housing, community. He was doing environmental, all kinds of different organizing. And he ended up in Echo Park here in Los Angeles. And he was a collector. So I remember hearing these stories when we were doing his memorial a couple years ago about his son was talking about, because his dad loved to walk. His dad didn't really like driving. And so
Mhm.
his thing was, he would make a route. So he'd be walking. But if he passed any kind of bookstore, he would always go into the bookstore and he would always say, I'm going to buy at least two books. Right. So
Mm.
he'd been building this collection himself. Right. And of course, he was very politically minded. So he was
So it
pulling all
wasn't
these really,
just any two books he was likely to be buying.
it was about 10,000 books, right, that we inherited. And we're still kind
Uh-huh.
of inventorying all that. But there's lots. We have this huge collection of stuff on Stalin. There's so many books on Malcolm, of course. And but that was the thing too. He was like, and then there's a lot of books on Nazi Germany, right?
Hmm.
Studying what fascism looked like. That very unique.
And so now those books, are they available to people to borrow if they want to know what fascism looks like at this
Yeah,
particular juncture? They can come to your store and borrow those books that were part of that collection.
yeah,
Is that
yeah,
correct?
yes.
Because I find that very interesting. So I think if I understood correctly the story on your website, which is blacklanternbooks.com, the the motivation for all of this was Kwame's collection.
Yeah.
And you at some point you decided not only did you want to save this whole collection and make it available to the community on a lending basis,
Hmm.
but you also have this bookstore.
Hmm.
So the books that you're selling, are they some of them part of that collection as well, or this is just you're curating sort of a black liberation bookstore kind of inventory? What's going on there?
Yeah, and I think that, and it's just that we're because the bookstore kind of came up. We were like, okay, how are we going to find ways to pay for the space? Once we find a space, and then it was also a way for us to be able to continually bring in new titles, right, of contemporary works to add to the library collection. And so we've been curating this this inventory of, as you were saying, like Black liberation texts and
And so that's
international political texts.
current publications as well
Yeah,
as
as
maybe
old ones too.
what you
Hmm.
would consider should be on people's reading lists from
Hmm.
other
And we're dipping
from
our
the
toes
past?
into. We just started trying to publish stuff that's been out of print too.
Okay.
So bringing those new titles up and back and making those available for people.
So how long has Black Lantern Bookstore been open?
We were a year in November.
And
Yeah.
so what kind of background do you bring to this whole endeavor? Because it sounds like you are pretty wholly involved in it and giving a lot of your time.
That's so that's been I think that's been one of the bigger tests over this year too. I think for all of us, because we all this is something we do on the side. We
Okay.
all have full-time jobs. And Zach is also going to school because Zach is learning archiving in a more formal sense too, right? To kind of bring those skills to the library. And so personally, so yeah, I'm myself. I work in labor rights, so that's my day job, as I say. And so we have, and we all met. So Zach, myself, and Natalie, we all met in organization, right? We were all at one time members of Black Alliance for Peace. And so that's how we all met each other through community organizing, and that's how we met Kwame too. And
And so
so,
that's, would you say, the backbone of what this project is also about, the Black Lantern Bookstore, which is married to, well, I don't know if that's the right word, but the Legacy Library.
yes, yeah, because that was Kwazi when we were when we initially met Kwazi. He was telling us about the books, and he was he was asking for help. He was like, I don't know what to do with all this. He's like, I'm getting older. What am I going to do with all these books? So
Mhm.
we initially were talking to him about trying to do something like we're doing now, and making sure that like we needed a space that was ran by Black folks, centered around Black folks, that would be able to have these kind of conversations and have this kind of education and have that community building. I think that's a huge part of it too. We have the library, we have the bookstore, but we also have all kinds of events to just bring people into the space.
Like what? What happens in this space?
Like just Monday, right? We had our second annual Martin Luther King Day cookout, where we invite all the organizations that utilize the space and all community around, right? So everyone can kind of just get together. It's probably the least formal of the events that we have, which I like, because it's a place for just people to get to know each other and not have to connect under maybe the pressure of political ideals or something like that. But we have lots of book talks. I think we average probably about two a month over this last year. We've had some really amazing folks come through, like Gerald Horn came and spoke. We've had Gerald Horns come through. We had Kamau Franklin come through, talk about his book and his involvement in the Cop City protests that were happening in Atlanta. We've had multiple Panthers come through who've talked about their lives. We have really good friends of ours at the library, is like Lorenzo and Janina Kamboa, both members of Black Panther Party. And yeah, so we've had all kinds. Yeah, so we have book talks. A lot of that's housed through the bookstore, and through the library we do a lot of community skill building. So we've had arts workshops. We work with arts collective called It's in Scope, and they come and do like these arts workshops around screen printing, block printing. A lot of poets and writers have become a part of the community. So we have folks starting writing workshops.
And
We
you
have
have a
folks.
poet in residence, don't you?
Yes, yes, yeah, with Layla. We just kind of folded that into our kind of into the project. Yeah, so Walela is has become our poet in residence, because Walela has been doing a lot in the space, right? Because that's the thing too. We want the space to be stewarded by community as well. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
coming through and you're doing stuff, be a part of administering the space, come be a part of making sure it can continue. Right.
Okay. So, what about a little reading list before I let you go? You have, describe the Black Lantern bookstore maybe first in a couple of sentences for somebody who might consider going out there or visiting your website.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess our tag is kind of like, we're a Pan African bookstore, a Pan African bookstore
Pan
with a focus
African
on
bookstore.
liberatory politics. Yeah.
And not only a bookstore, but a lending library
And
as
the Linden
well,
Library. Yeah.
right? And so, I don't know. Well, you don't have to recommend 5 books, but maybe just what are you reading? What are you
What
reading
am I
right now?
reading
Yeah, what you
currently?
reading? Yeah.
So I'm one of those people who I read like, 4 books at a time, a little bit here, a little bit there.
Okay. So let's hear them all.
So I'm reading through, actually, speaking of Lorenzo, I'm reading through Lorenzo's kind of memoir. It's called Black Anarchism, or Anarchism in the Black Revolution. And I'm reading through Society of the Spectacle right now.
Is that
And
are those essays? What is that? Society of the Spectacle.
Society of the Spectacle is by Guy Debord. So he was one of the situationists back in the day. And it's a friend of mine, when we talk about it, I kind of feel like Debord does for kind of cultural production what Marx did for economics.
Interesting.
And we
Okay.
often, yeah, it's interesting. It's written in these almost like tweets. This was written in the 60s. And my friend likes to say that Debord invented the tweet because it's written in all these little chunks of texts.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it explores the way, kind of the capitalism as cultural production, how it works and how it kind of permeates society.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much, Cipriano Belser, for joining me here in the Audio Garden today, one of the partners in Black Lantern Bookstore and the Legacy Library. Where are you located and how can people get in touch with you or find out more about the Black Lantern Bookstore?
Yeah, if you want to come visit us in person, we are at 6533 West Boulevard, Englewood, California. As you mentioned before, you can visit our website, blacklanternbooks.com. You can find us on Instagram at Black Lantern Co-op. We have our Patreon, Black Lantern Books. So we love it's a space where we allow people to come, especially can't come in person, to help support.
So, what do you do on the Patreon? What do you offer people there?
So with Patreon, we offer some of the exclusive. So like I said, we work with a lot of arts collectives. So we'll have exclusive shirts and stuff that go out to, and arts pieces that might go out to patrons. And then they get first, whenever we reprint a book, they get a copy of the books that we do reprint that are out of print now. And they get first access to a lot of the recordings that we've done for a lot of the book talks and events.
Nice. And one other question. What's in a name? Why Black Lantern Books?
So we were sitting one day trying to figure out what do we want to call the bookstore, and it's inspired by Harriet Tubman and us kind of thinking about how people refer to knowledge as light, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what does it mean to be that light in the dark for folks, right? As we're trying to move through the things that we got to move through.
Well, thank you for that, Cipriano. And I want to thank my daughter, Crystal, for introducing us many years ago on Facebook. And I'm glad it's finally come to this point where I'm meeting you in person in the Audio Garden here on the Listen and Be Heard Network. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.